One very morning on the island of Sodor, Gordon, James, Thomas, and Stanley were preparing for their day's work. It had stormed during the night, and now the ground was covered in a thick fog. Soon, Sir Tom Hat came to the sheds with bad news. "With visibility so low, we will have to cancel morning trains." "Disgraceful," spluttered Gordon, who was planning to pull a special train that morning and was very disappointed. "Despicable," muttered James. He was the guaranteed connection for Edward and wanted to be early. "I know you two wish to keep up appearances," Sir Tom Hat said sternly, "but it is hard to see the signals. For the meantime, we will have to wait." "It's okay, sir," laughed Stanley. "Gordon doesn't like to follow signals even when he can see them." "And James is deathly afraid of the trees," Thomas added. Gordon and James let off steam. Gordon did not like to be reminded of the time that he had stubbornly missed a red signal to prove Edward wrong, only to end up down an embankment. And James, at the time, he encountered a tree on the line. "What do you know about signals, Stanley?" Gordon retorted. "I seem to remember that you got lost while taking a shortcut." "And you, Thomas," James barked. "Didn't you run out of the shed because Percy made ghostly noises at you?" Soon, the sheds became a raucous chorus of whistles as the engines argued. "Quiet!" bellowed the top hat. "I know that this is disappointing for all of you, but we must be safe. None of you are to go out on the main line alone." When the top hat left, Thomas and Stanley became worried. "Well, why?" asked Stanley. "What's out there?" James was about to explain fog, signals, and trees again, but Gordon, who wanted to pay the little two engines out, shushed them, and together they devised a plan. Why do you ask?" James recovered, following Gordon's lead. "The top hat says we aren't allowed to go on the main line alone. What's going to happen if we do?" "Well," James said, "they say that when the fog is thick, demons roam the rails looking for vulnerable engines." The demons?" Thomas shrieked. "Shh," said Gordon. "They'll hear us." The yard was eerily silent. "If the demons get you," James continued, "they'll drag you to the back of the workshop to what? To what?" Stanley cried. "Oh, it makes my wheels wobble to think of it," Gordon said. "You see that red light over there?" James said, directing Thomas and Stanley's attention to a workshop nearby, where, from within, a bright red light shone. "That's the demon's light," James finished. "Underneath the workshop is an underground railway, where a monster takes you and tears you apart rivet by rivet. Once an engine enters, they'll never come back." Stanley and Thomas quivered. "How do we get rid of these demons?" "We can only wait for the fog to lift. Until then, we must be very quiet," said Gordon. As James and Gordon whispered to each other to put the final phase of the joke into action. Then, Thomas started rolling towards the turntable. "Where are you going?" Stanley shrieked. I can't stop," Thomas cried. They're pulling me! Help! Help!" Stanley darted forward, but the turntable was against him. Thomas slowly slinked away into the surrounding fog, and then he was gone! "Oh no!" Stanley whimpered with tears in his eyes. "Well, what?" James and Gordon bleated, most confused. Suddenly, they heard a blood-curdling scream from inside the workshop. They all jumped. "Did you tell him to do that?" James asked Gordon, suddenly very frightened. No, I certainly did not." "Then, what was that?" "The demons got him," Stanley said, his tears streaming down. Gordon and James were speechless. They, too, started quivering. "Thomas!" Gordon called, but there was no answer. Then, a bright light broke through the fog. They could hear an engine approaching, slowly at first, but then much faster. Gordon, James, and Stanley all screamed, "Ah!" Out of the fog came a familiar shape. It was Thomas! There was a brief pause. And then Thomas and Stanley broke out into laughter. "Well, what is the meaning of this?" Gordon bellowed. "Us little engines might be small," said Thomas, "but we're clever and always one step ahead." "Yes," Stanley continued. "So much for them and for special trains. I thank you, and I can handle their work. They're far too scared to leave the sheds." Gordon began to smile. It had been a clever counter to the trick, but to maintain this composure, he gave a great huff. "Well, their trick wasn't that scary, was it, James?" Yes, no. Absolutely despicable. Really quite amateur. Ours was much better." Thomas spoke to Stanley, and vice versa. Then the two smiled, realizing that sometimes big engines were too big to admit that they were scared.